Just before we get started, we just wanted to talk a little bit about what the Youth Advisory Board is and what we do. So we are a group of 16 to 25-year-olds who are really interested in celebrating and elevating the work of Chichester Festival Theatre. So, as I said, we meet every 2 months, and what we do is both celebrating the work that's put on stages, but also actually critically thinking about what the theatre could do better. Within the last few years, one of the initiatives that the Youth Advisory Board has been really instrumental in creating is the Artist Development Programme, which some of you might have heard of. That's been rolled out in the last few months, and that's essentially involved new artists being nurtured and helped along their journey to create new work by the theatre through grants and support. We've also been looking at things like marketing and how to better market shows to young people, and also the environment and sustainability. This is something which some of you may be aware of, that the theatre has really taken on board in the last few years. Obviously, climate change is a really pressing issue, not only for young people, but for all of us. And that's something the theatre is increasingly working towards achieving. So that takes me on to our first question, which is to you, Justin. So we know that in your previous role as Artistic Director at the Unicorn Theatre, you were really instrumental in putting sustainability initiatives into place. And we also know there's some big things happening with that in Chichester at the moment, including Green Book Productions, which this production is one. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that process of sustainability and theatre and what that has meant for this production in particular.
Thank you very much, Aled. I just also want to say, first of all, how happy and pleased and excited I am to be being interviewed by you. One of the things that struck me most since I've been here, I moved down with my family in July, but I kind of started doing the job last April. And one of the things that struck me the most about Chichester Festival Theatre, and which surprised me, was the legacy of theatre going and passion from the community that this organisation engenders. I have had a lot of people tell me that they were at the very first performance in 1962. There must have been 50,000 in there, but what I, in seriousness, seriously, what I absolutely love is just people love telling me about shows they saw in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up till now. People love telling me about when they saw their niece, their nephew, their grandchild in the Christmas show, in one of our spectacular Chichester Festival Youth Theatre Christmas shows. And what the Youth Advisory Board do so brilliantly is help us as an organisation continually think about what the future is, because myself and Kathy Bourne, who's the Executive Director, we're just stewards of this amazing organisation. And actually, the Youth Advisory Board, they provide us with a kind of clear sense of challenge and support as we think about what the legacy of the organisation will be long after we've gone. And of course, they do that alongside our brilliant senior leadership team, and of course, our board of trustees, who also, have that incredible challenge of maintaining our security at the moment and our ability to be creatively ambitious, but also, again, thinking about what the organisation will look like in 10 years' time. So I'm really pleased, and I'm so glad you guys agreed to interview me. To the question about the Theatre Green Book. So the Theatre Green Book is really brilliant industry-wide initiative, but Chichester Festival Theatre are one of the kind of pioneering organisations within it. And it's about thinking about how do you turn theatre processes from being linear, so you get materials, you make the show, you chuck the materials in the bin, to being a circular process. So you think about where you source those materials from in the first place, so maybe they could have already had another life in some degree, and then you use them for the show and make a brilliant show, and then afterwards you're already thinking about where they're going to go after that, what the next bit of their life is. And actually, no one theatre is going to solve this on their own, and that goes down to things like tiny minutiae of things. It's like, what glue do you use to stick something with? Because some glues you can burn them off and then reuse the materials again. Some glues won't let you do that. What paints you choose to use, because again, some paints you can strip, some paints you can't. And it just, and obviously what things at the end of the process, you go, wait a minute, I know they're doing a production of X, Y, and Z, and maybe they need, 1950s plugs in that, and where can they go afterwards? So that's what the kind of whole Green Book process is. And actually, I'm really interested in it because I passionately want to, try and live in harmony, better harmony with the environment. But also, on a pure business level, if we can do that well, it will save us loads of money in the end. It won't to start with, but over time, it will save us money. Now, how many of you here have saw the house party? Oh, great. Love a crowd like this. Lovely. So, the house party, so we've committed this season, we are aiming to try that every single one of the shows in the Minerva will meet the Green Book basic standard. And the basic standard, I had to write this down on my hands and cheat a little bit, means that 50% of the materials going into the show are reused, reclaimed, or recycled. And at the end of the process, 65% of them will go on to have another life, be reused, reclaimed, and recycled. And so that's the basic level. The intermediate level is 60% when they come in are reused, reclaimed, recycled, and 70% after the show finishes have the same process. And the advanced level, we're not going to get any advanced this year, 75% are reused to begin with, and then 80% go on to another life. Now, you saw the house party, right? The most contemporary play in my season, a play literally about now, about an 18th birthday party that could be happening today. And you wouldn't look at that play and go, you wouldn't look at that set and have gone, they have really consciously thought about the lifespan of the materials in that design, or in any way that you would compromise it, right? That looked like a very high-end, very high-spec contemporary kitchen. But that show, basically, and because we've now completed the cycle of that show was 1% of being intermediate on Green Book standards. So that means, there's 1% off, 60% being from reused, recycled materials, and 70% going. Now, the Caretaker is going to meet the intermediate standard. It's easier in some ways. Yeah, it's easier in some ways. I get that. But, and then there will be shows in this season that we might not achieve that on. But it's about, we then take those learnings, we pull them back, we share them with other theatres. We go, this works, this doesn't work, this is, this thing we think about. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating set of challenges for a production manager because I'm in now, this is my penultimate preview. You know that in this week, we need things really quickly. So in your earlier calculation, and that is what ends up making an environmental impact, a negative environmental impact, making quick decisions right at the end. So you know that what you have to do is be really as far ahead of things as you can be, the better chance you've got of meeting those goals, because then you buy yourself this emergency time. I used to call it the glitter ball effect at the Unicorn. That just chucking that last bit of magic dust over everything. You know you're going to need to do that. So what can you do earlier on in the process that means that you've got enough credit in the green bank, as it were, to do that? And just want to share a tiny little thing with you here. In the nature of recycling and reclaiming and reusing, obviously in The Caretaker, the incredible Ian McDermott is playing the role of Davies, known for all of his brilliant performances on stage, his Tony Awards and so on and so forth, and running the Almeida and all that stuff, but obviously also known as the dark force incarnate in Senator Palpatine and the Emperor. And some of this very floor here comes from a certain well-known film franchise. Would you believe it? We thought we'd make him at home, you see, while he was down here. I hope that answers the question about the Green Book and what it means. But it's also, just to say, we're not going to achieve it all the time, and it's important to share when we don't achieve it and why we don't achieve it. It's not, it's not just a massive thing about patting yourself on the back. It's about going, sharing that knowledge within the industry and going, this is why the process worked here and this is why it didn't. I'm really excited because actually Redlands, we are also aiming for at least basic standard for Redlands. We're only doing one in the Festival Theatre this year. But obviously the aim is, as I move through my tenure, by the end, it should just be absolute practice with all the designers, directors, production managers coming through this building. Like all of these things. It's a gradual revolution.
Thank you. I've got a question about the themes of The Caretaker. So the play deals with limitations of spoken language. The characters do a lot of talking, but they fail to communicate effectively. So there is this emphasis on physicality and gestures as a way of conveying complex feelings. How do you transform something that's simple, like fiddling with a screwdriver and a plug, into something that expresses deeper ideas?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for the question. It's a brilliant question. And so this is about, again, it links actually strangely to the Green Book question, which is when I turned up on my first day of rehearsal, I had, because we knew we were trying to have this ambitious Green Book standard, we really pressed to have every single actual prop in the room on day one. That has never happened in the entirety of me rehearsing plays for nearly 20 years. We had every single thing because actually Adam, who plays Aston, can't fiddle with a contemporary plug because it's completely different to fixing a 1950s plug where they didn't have the earth wire, obviously. So or we can't have a contemporary Dyson Hoover. We need that 1950s vacuum cleaner in order for those actors to really feel like they live in, they own, they possess this room. Like when I came, what I set out to do with this season was to do shows that really celebrate the difference between these two amazing spaces. And we are so lucky here at Chichester in the two spaces that we have. This room for over the road for big plays with big public ideas and debate and discussion and big laughs and big cries. And then this room where you really should be leaning in, feeling like you're watching a goldfish bowl that you're not really meant to be watching. And so what we've really relished and enjoyed is really like just being able to be so detailed with everything geographically in this room, and I hope that shows in the work. And then, as you were alluding to, Pinter's just, I'm going to go. He was an absolute genius because, the puzzle, the continual puzzle of brushing away. A character says X, but they mean Y, or do they mean Z, or do they mean P, or Q, or do they mean an entirely different language, entirely new that I've got to learn? It's all that, and it's been a total joy. I think for the actors, it's an absolute nightmare to learn, but it's been a total joy. And of course, he adds in not just the kind of intricacies of the subtext of every single line, but also Pinter, the pauses, the ellipses, the questions, all like it is really like reading a musical score. But what is, I think, remarkable is that's our job, if that makes sense. And if we've done it well, you won't see any of that, if that makes sense. You just see three human beings, really complex human beings, in a space, like battling for connection, sometimes battling for like dominance and subservience. So but sometimes battling for love. But to get to that, there's this kind of really tiny, pointillist, detailed, forensic work that's gone in the rehearsal room. As you can see, I've enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, basically, I've loved it. Yeah, it's been great.
So, prepare yourself. Let's get on to the conversation about programming. So, as we know, there must be a lot of plays that you'd like to direct or maybe program. So, what are some of the things that you consider when programming a new season?
It's a great question. Thank you, Jacob. So, to go back quickly to my point before, I start with the architecture, the two buildings, and what I want to do in those two buildings and how they should feel different, and how you as audience can have a different experience in those two buildings. But then, of course, there's a whole other set of really, interesting challenges in the puzzle of putting it together, and they range from what kind of stories I want to tell, what stories have you as an audience had before, what stories have your audience not had and like will be hungry for? What shows will give you just a really good night out? What shows might challenge you, provoke you, leave you having a furious conversation with each other on the way out? There's a whole range of things that I kind of add into the matrix. And then, obviously, I'm a director, I think about what are the artists that you're going to be, that you know, like people like Jonathan Kent, who's coming next, and you'll be excited by, or the artists that, you know, are completely new to you, like Paul Hunter or Lucy Bailey, you know, actually she has here before, but a long time ago, you know, who, or reintroducing you to. And it's, you know, when I think about things, it's there's a fine balance between, providing, like, you kind of look at it and you go, okay, that person, Jeremy Herrin directing The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, that's a banker. So the house party, Holly Race Rowan, who does know the organisation, but the play feels like, let's take more of a gamble there. And it's kind of that. It's a kind of game of artistic risk management, which doesn't sound very sexy, does it? But that's the kind of process you're going through. You're kind of weighing those different things up. And then, you know, the other thing is I talked just now about the audience. Well, of course, you're all completely different. And with different shows, I'm trying to do different things. So with the house party, I'm really targeting my, you know, the new audience members that I'm trying to attract. I'm trying to really attract the kind of 16 to 30-year-old age group. Doesn't mean that everybody else can't enjoy the show. I think people did enjoy the show. But I go, well, I can really use that to target that audience. When we do Oliver, I know that I can get, you know, grandparents, great-grandparents probably, grandparents, parents, children, you know, really young children, across the whole spectrum of the organisation. And that's really important, because it's really important for me that these are civic spaces, these are community spaces, that we see a really broad section of society in these buildings, you know, and that gives the buildings life. That really gives the buildings life. I mean, not like the feeling here at Christmas with Jungle Book, Three Weeks Gruff, The Real Father Christmas, you know, that just made the building feel amazing, you know, and that sense is I'm really, you know, keen to engender that and explore it and surprise you, you know, like, you know, I'd hopefully, what we're trying to do is stay maybe one step ahead, so you're never quite sure what the next thing is, but, you know, you trust us enough that the quality of the work will be high enough that you want to come back for the next thing and you go, I'm excited by that next surprise or that next adventure. Did that answer the question, Jacob?
It did.
Fantastic. So the next question, Justin, you mentioned that there's only 3 people on stage in this play, and I guess interestingly that sort of talks to the themes of the play, that in one sense it's a play about isolation, but also it's also sort of about claustrophobia, and these characters feel, you know, they're sort of can be annoying each other at times and frustrating each other. So how do those two themes work alongside each other? Do you think they contradict each other or sort of accentuate?
I'm gonna answer your question, and I'm going to talk about what Pinter said the play was about, which is really interesting. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, the reason the Minerva is a perfect space for this play is because it has claustrophobia baked into it, or intensity baked into it. And as you know, what we've tried to do with the production, and I leave you guys to judge whether we've succeeded, is to, you know, put these 3 complex human beings with different idiosyncrasies, maybe a stronger word, but maybe stronger words needed, but in a room and watch the pressure just slowly crank up, and then what you see towards the latter half of the play is the explosion of that. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I think that doesn't give any spoilers away. Interestingly, Pinter, very famously reticent talking about his work, wouldn't want to tell people what his work was about. But he did say this about The Caretaker, which he said, it was a play about love. It was a play about love for your brother, love for your home. So I'll leave that with you all, see whether you think, when you see the play, whether you think it's a play about love. But it's a really interesting, that's the one thing he said about the play.
I think this idea of alienation and within a very claustrophobic environment really speaks to young people today and in general society, especially post-pandemic, how we can be in one room but feel really isolated.
It's almost
really
like,
good.
Ophelia, that's partly why I programmed it.